After a media silence that I think everyone in the country noticed, including not only mainstream media but also Twitter and Facebook, the NRA has finally come out with their official position after the shootings last Friday in Sandy Hook Elementary. And that's Wayne LaPierre, the chief lobbyist for the NRA, came out, and he had a number of statements. From my point of view, each one more comical than the last. Why don't we start with his first little segment?
Politicians pass laws for gun-free school zones, and in doing so, they tell every insane killer in America that schools are the safest place to inflict maximum mayhem with minimum risk.
There seem to be a couple of logical issues with that. John, what happens to these shooters usually at the end of these shootings in the schools?
Typically, the final person that they shoot is themselves in the head almost every time. They're either they kill themselves or they're hauled away by the police. It seems like 100% risk, actually, and they don't seem to mind it at all.
Gun-free zones are a signal to killers. I only wish that there had been someone armed at Fort Hood to stop that shooting.
That's a devastating point. Mm-hmm. I hadn't thought of that. I mean,
just
God.
One armed guy there maybe could have stopped that shooting.
And then second of all, we went back and looked at, based on what Michael Schur sent out, at Columbine, there was an armed guard.
Armed guard got into a shootout with Eric Harris. He would normally ate in the cafeteria. Neil Gardner was his name. He normally ate in the cafeteria with the students. He was called a community resource officer, and he was at Columbine. But for whatever reason, he was eating in his squad car with the deputy principal that day, and they got a call saying come around back. He went around back, heard shooting, saw smoke, kids streaming out of the building, and he eventually got into a significant shootout with, it looked like from what I read, with Eric Harris.
Yeah. How was that not reported?
I think it
not
was.
even in Bowling for I've never heard about that before.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so it turns out the armed guard didn't work, but nonetheless, the NRA thinks it's onto something here. Yeah. Let's keep it going.
How many more copycats are waiting in the wings for their moment of fame? From a national media machine that rewards them with wall-to-wall attention, how can we possibly even guess how many? Given our nation's refusal to create an active national database of the mentally ill.
So two things there. Number one, let's divert all the attention away from guns, and let's pick other things to blame. Don't politicize it, except for when I blame the media. Right. Okay, that was point number one. And number two, don't politicize it until I blame the mentally ill. Which, by the way, statistics show that the mentally ill are not more prone to do these acts of violence than the regular Americans.
Yeah, and this is why, while it seemed reasonable, and I'm sure you guys, I certainly, I'll speak only for me, fell into the trap of saying, well, it seems reasonable to talk about mental illness. And it still seems reasonable to talk about people with mental conditions regarding this. In some ways, this is why it isn't. This is why the conversation can be about nothing except guns, because it's exactly what these guys want to do.
Yeah, and so understand, look, if you find a particular condition that leads more to violence, I would be predisposed to believing that. We'd have to have real thoughtful conversation about that rather than, classify all the mentally ill, right? Because there's an enormous range of mental illness, and most of it does no harm whatsoever, right? So now the second thing is, you're not going to do a registry of guns to find out who's might be using an illegal gun, whatever, a million reasons why you'd want a registry. But you're going to register people with mental illness. So they're going to go around and try to find all the people who, I don't know, are autistic,
look, it's the
have Down syndrome? What harm are they going to do?
The worst thing he said, this guy is David Duke, man, as far as whether he should be embraced in sort of popular media, whether he should be accepted as part of the mainstream media, as spokesman we should take seriously. You want to have a registry of people who have mental conditions? I mean, that's a blacklist.
That will be on the internet in about 3 days.
Yeah, let's get that together. Then nobody will get hired. Who decides what is significant? You're going to call autism and Asperger's that? People who are less disposed to violence than the three of us sitting right here? Yeah. That's crazy. Here's what that is. Let's call that a blacklist. We'll make that list. And then we'll keep those people from working in whatever industry they want to. Then we'll all be safe.
And by the way,
keep them out of the workplace, keep them out of schools.
The whole point of it is to say these are the people who might do the shootings.
Totally.
Because he's doing it in the context of the shootings. That's why he's saying, in order to prevent the shootings, let's create this blacklist of people who might do it. It's not gun owners, it's the mentally ill.
And I would, maybe you could agree with him if one time at the end of a shooting, somewhere, you'd been able to find a neighbor who said, I don't know, he just seemed like a regular guy.
Yeah, that's only happened 99% of the time.
Fuck that guy. That's the worst part that they've said. This idea that we're going to take the people, the most vulnerable people we have in society, and we're going to mock them and ostracize them. Let's make them. I tell you what. Here's this. Forget the blacklist idea. And you know, as a working for TCM, how I feel about the blacklist. Here's what they should do. Let's give them like some sort of marker that they could wear on their clothes to show that they were mentally ill, like a star or something. Just a 5-point star, not a 6-point star. They're not Jewish, for crying out loud. Let's put that on their clothing, and that way we'll always know where they are.
But Ben, on the other hand, though, if you did that to gun owners, I'm sure Wayne LaPierre would also agree.
Totally, yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah, let's have a registry of people who have like an unhealthy, in my opinion, obsession with guns. They are members of multiple.
How dare you, you fascist!
Yeah, exactly.
You fascist!
Yeah.
No, do it to others. Don't do it to the people who we represent.
I was just going to say, possibly vying for worst thing that he said. We have his actual policy prescription, which is coming up in this next clip.
If we truly cherish our kids more than our money, more than our celebrities,
Yes.
more than our sports stadiums, we must give them the greatest level of protection possible. I call on Congress today to act immediately to appropriate whatever is necessary to put armed police officers in every single school in this nation. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
So if we cherish them more than our celebrities and our sports teams, notice he doesn't mention cherish them more than our guns, for instance.
Oh, that's a great point. And so, shockingly enough, it turns out the position of the NRA, after they said they would put a lot of thought into how, and they would do introspection, they would look inwards, and it turns out that their policy proposal is more guns. Wow, I didn't see that coming. The only thing that could stop a bad guy with an RPG, by the way, is a good guy with an RPG. And the only guy who can stop a bad guy with a nuke is a good guy with a nuke. So, I mean, obviously, Wayne LaPierre is right. Let's give everybody nuclear
Military,
weapons.
as Bloomberg said, working on those nuclear-tipped rifles. Well, you got to give a good guy a nuclear-tipped rifle.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't have armed drones over each school. You know, so because the only thing that stops weaponry is more weaponry. If you believe the NRA, look, what this guy is a pimp, and not in a good way. He's a pimp for the gun manufacturers. So if after a tragedy involving prostitutes, if the largest pimp in the country came out and did a pro-prostitute speech, the only thing that cures hookers is more hookers. Okay, which would be an interesting
Let's test
argument.
that theory.
Right. I'm not sure that people would take him seriously. They might laugh. Right? And here comes the pimp for the gun manufacturers saying, hey, after guns have been used in massacre after massacre, my idea is more guns.
Why don't we just let people have grenades?
That's
You know,
Steve-O's point.
Right. I mean, grenades, you can't buy a grenade in this country, but it seems to me that you could buy a grenade. These guys would have used grenades.
But the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a grenade is a good guy with a grenade.
I'd like to see, that would be great, to see people sort of square off hurling grenades at each other.